Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the South and West Plans Panel. My name is Councillor Paul Ray, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed on the Leeds City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. Could I also remind those present that this is a formal meeting. Whilst we welcome attendance, we ask that proceedings are observed quietly and without interruption. Participants in the meeting are asked to maintain a courteous and respectful manner in questioning or making comments. South and West Plans Panel deals with applications from the south, west and northwest of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphones once you've introduced yourself. If I could please start from my left.
Afternoon, Adam Ward. I'm the South West team leader.
Good afternoon, I'm John Booth, Principal Engineer Highways.
Good afternoon, my name is Ray Jones and I'm the Council of Horsforth.
Afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy Rowntree. I'm one of the councillors for Kirkstall.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Killamanaka for Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill.
Good afternoon, everybody. Zara Hussain, Councillor for Roundhay Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Jordan Bowden, Councillor for Roundhay Ward, and I'm subbing for Andy Parnham.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Daniel Illingworth and I'm part of the Plans Panel team.
Good afternoon, Councillor Semfirth for the Harewood Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Stables from Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Warfield Ward.
Good afternoon, Debbie Oldham, and I'm clerk to the panel.
Hello, everyone. Nikki Diol, Head of Legal Services.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Afternoon, Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West and Lead Officer at South and West Plans Panel.
Thank you very much, everyone. Can I now move to the agenda? Could I ask the clerk to go through agenda items 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals. Agenda item 2, there's no exempt information. Under agenda item 3, there's no late items of business that I'm aware of. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interest? I take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, apologies have been received on behalf of Councillor Parnham and Councillor Franzmere. Councillor Bowden is attending as substitute for Councillor Parnham. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on Thursday, the 3rd of October 2024. Do members accept these minutes are a true and correct record? I will take silence as a yes. Are there any matters arising? I'll take no response as they're not. So we'll move on to item number 7, application to do change of use from a C3 dwelling house to a C2 residential institution as young person supported accommodation at number 16 Chilton Court, Rodley, Leeds, LS13 1PT. Could I ask the officer to present the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application was previously reported to Plans Panel on the 3rd of October and was the subject of a site visit that morning. The previous report is therefore appended Appendix 1 of your papers. In summary, it was for a change of use of a dwelling for use as a young person supported accommodation. That would be for 3 young people aged 16 to 25, with no more than 2 staff on site at any one time, with a 12-hour shift pattern ranging from 7:30 a.m. till 8 p.m. and 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. There would be the occasional visits by professionals and social workers. The panel will recall that there were a number of local objections which you heard at last panel last time, with the main concerns being access and car parking. At the previous panel meeting, members resolved to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement to restrict or prevent young persons from owning a car whilst resident at the property, and also a condition requiring the provision of a pedestrian entrance onto Town Street, which is to the north, just to the top of the picture there on the photograph. Officers didn't initially consider these elements were necessary to make the development acceptable, but members did. Now, since the last panel meeting, the applicant has had time to consider the various requests from panel. So firstly, in terms of the access onto Town Street at the frontage, this would involve the provision of a new entrance door or swapping the existing patio doors, the removal of section of the boundary wall, and also some steps would be required to navigate the difference in levels. That's the photograph there that you can see. So you can see the bottle balustrading or the walling at the front, that would be required to be removed. A set of steps would need to be installed to navigate the difference in levels, and then the patio door would need to be replaced by a secure door with a lock. It's worth pointing out that the applicants are not the owners of the property and the tenants. Consequently, the applicants have gone to the owner of the property, and the owner of the property is not in a position to allow these alterations to the premises to facilitate what members have asked for. So therefore, it's a scheme, it's an element which cannot be delivered. There would be no point in putting a planning condition on because the applicant hasn't got the ability to comply with that. So the question is this necessary to make the development acceptable? Now, it's clear that the property as a C3 dwelling has operated continuously without any problems before, as a dwelling, without any such provisions on that frontage. So pedestrian access is achievable by walking along Chiltern Court, onto Bagley Lane and then onto Town Street. It's a distance of approximately 130 metres. Members of the panel walked that route on the site visit that morning. Officers consider that wasn't necessary to make the development acceptable at the initial assessment, and we don't change that view at the moment. However, members may have a different view on that. In terms of the second item, it was about car ownership, and members requested that the applicants enter into a legal agreement to prevent the young people occupying the property from owning and running a car whilst resident. It's also, or we heard at the previous panel meeting from the applicants, that it would be very unlikely that the occupants would have the financial means to either own, tax, insure and run a car. So nevertheless, members still considered that a Section 106 agreement was necessary. The applicants have gone back to consider the legal agreement, and they do not consider that it is necessary to make the development acceptable. What they've said is that they would have controls in place and contracts with young people occupying the property, which would stipulate that they will not or shall not own a car whilst at the premises. So we feel as officers we could tie that up via a planning condition instead of a legal agreement, that a management plan is submitted to officers for approval, which would include details of car ownership and the sanctions on residents should they contravene that management agreement. So for these reasons, officers consider that the condition for the alternative access is not necessary, and also considered the prevention of car ownership can be dealt adequately through a planning condition. Also, since the publication of the report, further representations have been received from 2 local residents. These raise similar issues to before in October, which namely are impacting on car parking due to staff numbers, staff handovers and shifts, and that was considered at the previous panel meeting. It was unlikely that staff and visitors would park elsewhere on Town Street and Canal Road. Residents could also grab staff car keys and race off in staff cars. That the panel site visit took place in the morning when it was quieter, and that previous conditions have not been adhered to. So the offer recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions set out in the report, and also including the one requiring the submission of a management plan which would help restrict and prevent car ownership. The panel are of course entitled to reach a different view if they so wish, provided that this is based on sound planning reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. There are no speakers on this application, so we'll move straight to questions to officers. Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor, we'll get Councillor Anderson first and then Councillor Rowntree.
Right. So can I just clarify what it is you're asking us to do? You're asking us about the front of the building, and you're asking us not to have any concerns about parking, people coming or going. You feel that they are satisfied. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not asking you not to have any concerns about parking. What we're asking you is to say that the element of car parking and car ownership in officers' view, can be controlled through a planning condition rather than a Section 106 agreement.
Fine. So following on from that then, what you're arguing is that we were irrational the last time when we insisted upon it. You're saying that we were wrong to have even considered it, which was our right as a plans panel. Are you saying that we were wrong and that we shouldn't have done it because it's not something that officers support doing, and as such would leave us open if the applicants were to take us to any sort of appeal that it was being overly, not generous, overly pernickety? Are you saying that your advice to us is that for those reasons you think we should forget what we said beforehand?
I appreciate the question you're asking, but I don't think officers are saying we are wrong as members. They put forward a case, and they'll put forward the case in a second, but I think we need to be very careful. I don't think our officers are saying we were wrong. What they're saying is that we asked for additional conditions that can't be satisfied. If you want to answer the more technical point, please.
Yes, that's right, yeah. Not saying, officers are not saying members were wrong at all. You were quite entitled to reach that view. Right. Yes, we're not saying that members were wrong. You were quite clearly concerned about the parking issues for various reasons, and you were entitled to reach that view. Officers have gone back to try and negotiate and trying to make sure that those wishes are adhered to with the applicant, and for various reasons the applicant is not able to deliver on those items, one of which could be delivered through other means, i.e. planning condition rather than a Section 106.
The final point then is, if we were still minded to continue, you as officers would be happy and can support it and would be able to support it if a challenge came along?
A challenge from who? There's only a right of appeal if planning permission is refused. The applicant would have the right of appeal. If the application is approved, there's no third party right of appeal other than a third party making a challenge for judicial review. If
the applicants aren't happy with, if the applicants aren't happy, they could argue that we are being overly aggressive in terms of the conditions that we're putting on, and as such they could appeal against that. Is that a risk or not?
Can I come in to assist with this? I think I understand the point that you're making, Councillor Anderson. I think the point is if we apply this condition, can they at a later stage seek to vary or remove it? And they absolutely can. But there's clearly a thought process on which we have sought to introduce it in the grant of planning permission, and the LPA would make the decision at that time should an application come in.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. First off, could you possibly help me to understand the distinction between a planning condition and a planning obligation? I've become used to the expression planning condition, but the phrase planning obligation seems to have been used in a very specific way in this report. And
I'm very happy to assist you, Councillor. So we have two mechanisms by which we can bind the land and the development. Government guidance says that where applicable, planning conditions should be applied. Where there are complicated delivery of certain contractual requirements in relation to the land, normally affordable housing or green space, then that normally forms the basis of a Section 106 agreement, or sometimes a unilateral agreement. When you're at appeal, the developer will say, I'm willing to provide this in order to satisfy the requirements of planning policy. And then the term is planning obligation, but it takes form of a contract essentially between the LPA, the local planning authority, and the individual who is making the application and the landowner. It binds the land. So the 106 request would bind that land forever unless it's revoked, varied. That is a route through the 106. With the condition, you could seek to have it removed, that it's no longer applicable. And I think this is the point that Councillor Anderson was trying to get at the heart of it. Even if it's applied, well, the applicant can still come back. It's a statutory right of theirs, but that's a matter for the LPA at a future point. But officers are certainly not saying that, if I can support the officer in this, they're not saying that it was unreasonable to make that request as members.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful. And my other question was, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, but in relation to the discussions about car ownership for residents there, do you have any sense of why the applicant was not receptive to including this as a planning condition, why they wanted it to be done by means of a contract?
Yeah, the applicant didn't want to be bound by the 106, I think because it was maybe more of a complicated, costly process perhaps. That's my initial assessment. But in officer's view, it's something that can be secured by planning condition.
Yeah, sorry, there is just... Oh, it's quicker than you this time. I think the other issue is that with them not actually being the owner of the property and just going to effectively be leasing it, any 106 agreement has a further complication is that the landowner would also have to be involved as well as the company, which is Amethyst 2 24/7. So it just becomes a more costly, more complicated process for them. So you weren't wrong to ask for it. However, a condition would be easier and cheaper for them, but also it allows us to have the similar sort of control. So I don't think there's really much of an issue between it, to be fair.
Okay, so if we were to set it as a planning condition, then that would be in line with the applicant's thinking that they want to make it a contract with their residents, that they won't own a car while they live in the place.
Sorry, we're getting a bit mixed up in those terms here. We would apply a condition that would secure that. What they would then do, and it's for them to do this, as through part of the management, is that they would actually effectively, I suppose, the tenants, for want of a better description, would then have to adhere to that, and they would as the operator of the house. So it's for them to actually get into the absolute detail of how they phrase or control that with the tenants. Ultimately, it's for us to enforce the condition if they don't do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, thanks. That helps. Thank you.
Councillor Firth and then Councillor Manaka.
Thank you. Just to start with a very brief comment, I think it's unfortunately it was disappointing that the representatives from Amethyst at the previous meeting were not able to answer a lot of our questions. That meant, unfortunately, we don't have anyone to question on that, and it is concerning that also as a result it is not for us to have to worry about cost. The
Could we please move to a question?
Absolutely, Chair. As I said, leading into a question, which is I'd like to ask officers to comment on an email that we all received that we were CC'd into about the amount of cars that potentially would be on arrival, and a challenging of the calculation that was made that only 2 cars would need spaces when actually it could be 4 swapping over during the day, and given that we can't have access to the main road, therefore negates the view that potentially they can park elsewhere within a vicinity.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm not aware of this email that's been sent to members. Is the chair aware? I would really draw some caution in relation to introducing new essential objections or addendum objections at such a late stage, Councillor.
Can I just clarify? It was sent to plans panel at leeds.gov.uk on Tuesday.
Yeah, we did receive it on Tuesday, and officers have considered it, and John is in a position to answer the questions. A further one from the same gentleman was received today at 13 minutes to 12 to be absolutely precise, which also just raises the similar issues. But John, as a highway engineer, is in a position to answer that question, Councillor Firth.
Just to clarify that position, the quantum of car parking required for this development isn't determined by the prospective number of cars that might need to attend this property. It's determined by reference to the car parking standards, and the car parking standards for this type of development is 1 space per 3 residents. So given that there's 3 residents at this establishment, there's only a requirement for 1 parking space, which is what they've got. So it's a policy compliant parking proposal.
Thank you. Can I just clarify then, as a result, when we had Amethyst here at the previous time saying that at least 2 members of staff will be present for safety, does that have no resonance then in that case?
Sorry, just repeat that to Councillor Firth, please, because I didn't quite get the gist of that one.
In documentation, and previously when Amethyst, if I'm not mistaken, attended or had witnesses to come and give us information at the last panel meeting, it was raised, or it has been noted, that there will be 2 members of staff present at the property at all times.
The point that John's trying to make is that may be absolutely correct. However, the car parking standards that the City Council has to judge this application by refer to the number of tenants that occupy it, or the people in it, and the standards that we have for these types of uses is 1 parking space is required for 3 occupiers, not the people that may or may not be attending, looking after, servicing, but it's based on the people that actually are going to be living there. So it's policy compliant in that respect.
Thank you for that, Steve. I just want to add then on a particular point, if that's we're looking by policy, this panel put forward conditions at the previous meeting that should be put forward, and just simply because the applicant says they can't fulfil it due to cost, we are therefore potentially going to remove those. Is that policy compliant?
Policy compliance is an interesting way of putting it. All we're simply saying to you is that the condition, the Section 106 agreement, which was requested at the last plans panel by yourselves, the requirements of that Section 106 agreement can be done by another mechanism, which is a condition. So in effect, that has a nil effect on what was discussed last month and this month. The other one is because they don't have the ownership of the property itself. The owner has actually said that they don't want them to mess about with the back doors or the balustrading, etc. But from our perspective, as officers, we didn't think that was necessary anyway, because the property is in effect back to front and its main entrance is actually off Chiltern Court, where it has the policy compliant parking arrangements, whether you accept it's enough or not, it is policy compliant. Therefore, we don't think, as officers, as we didn't think last time, it's necessary to continue to try and pursue the break in the wall. And further to that, and I think it was a point Councillor Anderson was referring to, if members were still minded that that had to be a given, and therefore were to refuse it on that basis, because it's not necessary in our point of view, from a car parking policy perspective, it would be difficult for us to substantiate a refusal and sustain it at appeal.
Thank you for that further clarification. I think that there is the view that a material planning consideration also does include the context in which this development will be taking place. And given that we've had further information, although policy says in relation to the residents, we know exactly what the implications will be. And ultimately, as a result, does that not have an impact in terms of actually having a material consideration on then pushing this forward?
Well, the material planning considerations that the additional representations have been provided by the residents are the same as before in terms of parking, and my summary at the end of my presentation summarised those additional representations that don't really, in substance, raise any new issues that weren't covered before, but that have been reported to panel today, so it's up to members to take those into account in reaching your decision.
Any follow-up, Councillor? No, Councillor Manaka, then Councillor Anderson.
Chair, it's okay. I think Councillor has just addressed what some of the questions I wanted to ask in terms of the parking space and you know the occupiers living there and those working. So that's already been answered. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Anderson, then, please.
Clarify the first bullet point on page 17 under paragraph 4, where it says, this is what's been put here, is there would be a pool car for staff that looked after young people would not normally, my emphasis on the word normally, have access to cars, because my understanding by reading the papers is that one of the points the applicants are making is that there would not be, the occupiers wouldn't have cars of their own. That's one of the points that they're making. So is the way that this has been phrased by officers not normally correct, or is it just a categoric they would not have? Because to me there is a difference between not normally, which means it is possible, the words not normally. So is that the applicant's words, or is it an officer in reading through what the applicants have said and their interpretation thereof?
Yeah, that's what the applicant said at the last plans panel meeting. Since then, we've gone on to clarify that, and they've categorically said that people would not have cars, and that would be secured through a management plan and occupancy agreement. So the words normally are actually from 2 months ago.
Any follow-up? Any more questions from members? Can we move into comments then? Any comments from members? Unusually quiet. Councillor Anderson?
I want to continue with what we had agreed the last time. We debated it and we reached a conclusion the last time, which we were happy with. Some of us wanted to go for a refusal. We lost that democratically, and the compromise position was that we would go for this. So it was felt okay at that point. I can't see what has changed. My instinct is still, although despite the assurances we've received, I'm not convinced that with visitors coming and going in various other things that there won't be a large number of car movements, whether it be from professionals, from the staff coming and going as they have to do so, and the owners of the as well coming and going just to make sure everything's okay, because most owners would just be checking that everything's coming and going. So I am still convinced, and if I can't have my refusal, then I think we should stick with what we've had originally.
Is that an alternative motion, or was that just a comment? Because
Well, I can put it in as an alternative motion. We just keep as is.
would you be willing for other members to have some comments before that was seconded? Any other comments from members on this? Councillor Rontry?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't present at the meeting when this was first presented at the beginning of October. I'm struggling to see good grounds for not accepting the the officer's recommendation on this. I mean, I think the point regarding car ownership or access to cars by residents, with the removal of the word normally, that seems to me to be addressed there. And on that basis, I'm content with the recommendation that has been made. Thank you.
Any other comments, Councillor Stables?
I similarly are struggling to find reasons to refuse. I think the points have been addressed, and I think that it's a difficult situation, because if the building isn't owned by the applicant and they aren't going to, I can understand why they're not going to want to change that building, given that there's a stone wall in front of it, and that isn't the usual access. I can understand if I was the owner of that building that, I think that's quite reasonable not to want to do that. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. And there's no way to force them to do it anyway. So that, is a no-starter. And the other point, of course, is that if it went to appeal, we wouldn't win. So I can't see any reason, I can't see a justification for refusal.
Councillor Firth?
I just want to come back on the points that have been raised. We spent the last meeting vigorously going through this application, in which we then concluded, and something that I disagreed with in terms of I didn't want to remove parts of the wall, and but actually we then concluded we had to have a rear entrance due to the fact that parking was a major issue. It has been proven since then, potentially in comments from members of the public, and unfortunately from the below par representation we got from those who were representing Amethyst, who should have come fully with the full ammunition to be able to answer our questions and potentially to raise this as a particular issue at the time. And we are now potentially reneging on something that we as a panel debated for a long time to put forward, just simply because they've gone away and come back and said, no, we can't deliver it. We are subjudging this to ensure that this is a sustainable development if it has to move forward. And we should not be pushed around by the fact that they're saying they can't deliver it when in fact they were the ones that submitted the application with the support of the owner of that property in the first place.
Any other comments? So, Councillor Anderson, you propose an alternative motion. Is there a seconder for that alternative motion?
Sorry,
oh, sorry,
Chair.
1 second.
Sorry.
Ooh, straight there, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. As ever, we need to be clear as to exactly what the alternative motion is, because my reading of what Councillor Anderson is suggesting is that we're accepting that the use of a condition rather than the Section 106 agreement is okay to secure the non-use of cars by the residents of the property whilst they're there. So that boils down to the only other issue that was on the table the other month, which was about breaking out the wall to create the access into the rear of the property directly onto the footpath, which was because it was seen as not being convenient for people parking on this street that's in front of you here, Town Street, to walk around it. But as Adam said, it's only 130 metres, so is that what we're suggesting, that we're refusing it on the basis that they... I mean, I don't know what the issue is there, to be honest with you, because from a highway safety point of view, I think the officer here, particularly with the double yellow lines, would turn around and say, we don't want that access there. And that's in essence what officer was saying when this was brought to panel last time, that we didn't think it was necessary, and we don't think it's necessary now. So I just want to be absolutely clear what the alternative motion is that members might be voting on, please.
So I was going to bring in Councillor Anderson, then I'll bring in Councillor Firth. Councillor Anderson.
That you mentioned. I didn't agree. Well, I went along with it at the end of the day with the front of it. So I'm not willing. I'm not saying I'm going to go to the wall arguing for the wall to be demolished, for the wall to be taken out. It's the former that's more of my concern. That how we get that in so that we can stop any additional vehicles the best we possibly can within the law. Because we can't stop everybody coming and going, but if we can find a way of controlling the parking, the only compromise I can see was the one that we came up with the last time. So that's what I'm wanting.
You are, sorry, Chair, I think, Councillor Anderson, that concern is about the use of the condition, because that's the element of the two issues that were on the table last time that actually is covered by a condition. So as far as we can secure it, in terms of preventing the tenants actually having vehicles, therefore additional comings and goings, that is covered by the condition. What I'm saying to you is that the other issue, which I think concerns particularly Councillor Firth, which is the comings and goings of the carers or whatever, we don't have that control because our policy is targeted at the tenants and not the number of vehicles that might be associated with carers that come to the place, specialists, medical people, or even visitors. So we can only control that one element, which is covered by the condition. And what we've then done is we've also come back with commentary on the request by members to break out through that wall directly onto the street. And
I'm not arguing for.
Yeah, no, fine. Because I was going to say, because at that time, just for absolute clarity, officers didn't think that was necessary, and we still don't think it's necessary. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not here to say to people what, but I just want to remind colleagues, we did sit through a very long meeting in which that condition was placed. We actually were, both myself and Councillor Anderson, weren't fully in support of it, but then eventually let the democracy reign in terms of how that pushed forward. And I am concerned about the mindedness of the fact that, as I said before, that just because the applicant has now said they can't deliver it, that therefore we are then going to cave on what we were holding up as a standard, be it for the safety of the individuals in the property or even potentially due to those issues with parking, because of the fact there is double yellow lines all the way along each of the surrounding roads except for a couple of parking spaces on Town Street. So the only parking available is in a very congested cul-de-sac.
No, thank you for that, Councillor Fair. I think we're going around in circles now. As officers have made the case that, from their perspective, what we asked for and we were completely entitled to ask for isn't deliverable and defensible, and we're in that position. So now that we've had some clarity on what the concerns are you still wishing to put your alternative motion forward, Councillor Anderson?
Said before, I'm not the greatest wordsmith, but it's in respect of paragraph 3, I'm wanting that to stay. Furthermore, the applicant has raised concern over the necessity of securing the residents in care to having no access to vehicle. I'm wanting that to be there so that we've got that, at least that, to fall back on. Because if it does turn out that more car usage does come along, we can then, enforcement can then enforce that.
Councillor Anderson, that is still there, but it's just covered by a different mechanism. Rather than a Section 106 agreement or any unilateral undertaking, it's actually been covered by the condition. So that assurity is there.
But I know from experience that enforcement will come back and tell me on numerous occasions, sorry councillor, it wasn't written down as a condition, and as such we cannot enforce something that's not there. I'm asking for something in black and white that enforcement can enforce and that residents and local ward members can use as justification for some action to be taken by enforcement. Which of the conditions, there's 7 conditions there, which one is it that you say
Chair,
is covered by it?
Page 16, top of the page, bullet point 7, prior to first occupation, a management plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA, and the occupants in care at the site shall be restricted from owning a car vehicle for the full period of the occupancy at the site. So that's just a summary of the condition. The condition is always drafted up in detail afterwards, but that covers the point you're making, Councillor Anderson.
I think, you know, it's enforcement's enforcement. It's not for us at this panel to second guess different departments. I know we all have our moments with different departments, but we're here to make a decision on the application. I think we appreciate the point. So do you still have an alternative motion? Okay, so do I have a proposer for the officer recommendation then, please? Councillor Stables, and a second to Councillor Rontry. So we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the officer recommendation?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And for completeness, those against?
1.
Any abstentions?
Is that 2 against? 2.
Thank you very much for that, colleagues. Moving on to item number 8. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sum up.
Sorry, because seeing as we do have a crowd in today, I'll just for clarification that the application has been approved as per the officer recommendation, but subject to the conditions that are outlined on pages 15 and 16 of your report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I always play to the crowd. I just want to get through the meeting. Right, item number 8. Erection of a Part 6-storey, Part 4-storey building comprising 19 apartments, Class C3 and commercial space Class E, with associated parking, landscaping and auxiliary facilities at the land east of Ulcourts Lane and South Woodlands Road, Stanley, Pudsey, Leeds. Could I ask the officer to present the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. Wrong button. So yes, the application before members seeks consent for a new residential development of 19 apartments, including commercial space under Class E, for a gym area, coffee kiosk takeaway, including landscaping and parking. The application itself is referred to Plans Panel at the request of Councillor Andrew Carter on the basis of highway safety concerns, including overspill parking and rat running, along with concerns regarding the design, including massing, dominance and development, and the lack of external. So just for members' information, and as a verbal update, we have received a further late representation yesterday which raises similar concerns with the overall size and scale of the development and also highway safety concerns. We also have received a letter of support from Councillor Peter Cahill on the basis of the site being regenerated for a residential use. So just moving on to the presentation. There we go. Just to give members an aerial view of the site itself. It relates to the parcel of land before you, to the east of the main Pudsey Ring Road. Sorry, to the east of the main Pudsey Ring Road. So as you can see, the area is a mix of residential properties, which are situated to the north, and commercial uses, which lie to the west of the site itself, including a marketing agency, vehicle repair business and other commercial uses. The southern portion of the site is adjacent to the railway, with New Pudsey Station beyond, and access is taken via Alcoats Lane. So the following slides just provide members with some further context with an overview of the site itself, which is vacant, and the marketing agency to the east, which you can see before you there, and their parking area, and the linear terrace properties, which are to the north of the site. The second photo provides the view down Alcoats Lane itself from New Pudsey Station, and again it just shows the changing levels further north up towards the Ring Road and the access spur on the left hand side of that picture there. Again, just further photos for members' information showing the main aspects. The first shows the bulk of the site, which consists of a vacant area, and again that's been cleared. And the photo to the right shows the view down Woodlands Road, which constitutes a private access. You'll note it is in a poor state of repair in some places. And again, it shows the two-storey terrace properties to the north of the site, which run along Woodlands Avenue, back Woodlands Avenue, terrace, back Woodlands Terrace. Many of these have been extended with front and rear dormers within the roof space, so obviously 2 and 2.5, 3-storey in height. So this slide just provides the overall general site plan. The lower ground floor areas are made up of the main access routes, which form an undercroft beneath the main development, intersecting 2 residential blocks of dwellings which stand at 4 and 6 storeys in height. And the access leads to the main parking area at the rear portion of the site, which provides a total of 10 spaces with a disabled parking bay, again within the undercroft itself. The northern portion of the development sits at 4 storeys, and that's considered appropriate by officers given the 2 and 3-storey residential dwellings beyond this area, with the southern portion of the development which steps up to 6 storeys towards New Pudsey Station. The ground floor area of the development is mainly communal, and this incorporates a gym area and coffee takeaway kiosk, along with bin storage, cycle storage, patio areas, garden amenity area to the southwest corner. And again, just a further overview of the parking areas with the proposed landscape measures and tree planting provision, which is to be controlled by way of a condition, which will ensure that details are submitted and approved prior to occupation. And these areas are covered by additional conditions which require a landscape management plan for the development itself. The level of parking, which you can see before you, is considered acceptable by highways officers based on the total number of units, and given this highly sustainable location next to Pudsey Station and the Ring Road itself, which provide excellent public transport links. Given concerns were raised regarding congestion, parking and traffic management by both ward members and residents, it's proposed that further traffic management measures are secured via a potential TRO. This is to be secured by Section 106 and a commuted sum of £30,000, which is to be agreed in consultation with highways officers and ward members via obviously a Section 106, as I said. And as indicated on the slides, the development does not provide on-site green space provision. There is an area of garden space and amenity space, but this isn't obviously constituted as formal on-site green space. So the provision is again a commuted sum of circa £23,500, which is to be allocated towards green space enhancements within the ward as agreed by Parks and Countryside and consultation with ward members, again via the Section 106 mechanism. And this slide just provides the main internal layout of the development itself, which is replicated over the upper floors. As you can see, development is split between 1, 2 and 3 bedroom units, providing a mix of 6 1-bed, 11 2-bed and 2 3-bed units. And as is outlined within the panel report, this mix is broadly supported on the basis it meets with the requirements of 1 and 2 bedroom units. However, there is a slight shortfall of 3 bedroom units, but officers consider the mix is appropriate given the scheme has been significantly amended to reduce the development from 34 apartments down to 16. in order to address wider concerns regarding highways, dominance, design, bulk and parking, and hence the mix is considered on balance appropriate. As is outlined within the report pack, the development itself is subject to a 15% affordable housing requirement, and this will be controlled again by the Section 106 agreement. And each of the type of dwellings meets with the internal space standards requirement, along with accessibility requirements as is outlined within the report. And each dwelling benefits from a balcony area with external space, along with good levels of outlook to each of the habitable rooms. So turning to the proposed elevations, this is the main aspect from Owlcoats Lane. Members will note the use of the balconies and linear windows, along with the upper floor being finished in a standing seam detail, which is considered supportable by design officers. The slide shows the access and the slope down to the main parking area, which is just to the left of that slide, where you can see the vehicle coming out there, which again accesses out onto Owlcoats Lane. In addition to this, there will be a boundary wall and railings at the front, which provides defensible space for the development, along with the elevation to Woodlands Road at the side. And the outline of the initial proposals is to include, for members' information, showing the reduced overall height. So that the dotted line you can see there on the plan is just to draw members' attention to how the scheme has been reduced and amended in size. This shows the view of the rear of the larger 6-storey element of the development when taking into account the level changes. Members on site this morning will have noted that the changes in level at the front. So the main building actually reads as 5 storeys from the front of the development, but obviously with it sloping down towards the back of the site, it is 6-storey in height when you consider the undercroft there, so as per that slide. Again, just the side elevations, and these show the 4-storey element adjacent to Woodlands Road, with both the main aspect and the rear proportion of the block at 4 storeys in height. And again, just to highlight the balconies and the feature windows which are proposed on there. And this is the elevation from the new Pudsey Station side, looking up Owlcoats Lane, with the proposed use of obviously mix of pallet materials there on your right hand side, just for members' information. A buff brick, a red brick, external render, and the standing seam detail, which will be utilised to the upper floor of the development. And just finally, we just have some CGIs as part of the submission, just to give members an overview of how the development will appear itself. So this is the view down Owlcoats Lane itself, with the red facing brick and vertical cladding detail, which you can see to the top floors there. And in the bottom is the proposed coffee takeaway kiosk, which obviously people walking up and down towards New Pudsey Station, and obviously the highway, will be able to access there at the ground floor of the development. And again, just to show members the sort of finer detail that you'll note through the development, which has been secured via consultation with design colleagues. It shows the aluminium windows which are inset into the development, providing a shadow line for the detail, and the brick detail in there, which the banding in between intersecting each level of the development. Again, just a further overview of the windows and the detail for members. And this view just provides an alternative view from the private access down Woodlands Road. This is the alternate side with the buff brick and the 4-storey element, which will be closest to the residential properties. And again, the facade of that building is stepped just to provide some visual interest from a design perspective. And this slide just shows you a view down Owlcoats Lane itself. So that's just to give members an idea of how it will sit within the context of the residential development from a sort of wider view down towards the development itself. And finally, that's just a view from the ring road, showing you the contemporary balconies and again the mix of materials. So in summary, officers consider the scheme provides opportunity for the regeneration of a brownfield site, the provision of 19 new homes towards the housing supply, provision of off-site green space provision, tree planting, biodiversity net gain, and a building which will incorporate low carbon technologies. So the development gives rise to no significant concerns in relation to its impact on the design and character of the area, residential amenity for both existing and future residents, accessibility or highway safety and ecology, subject to the aforementioned conditions within the report, and obviously the section 106 mitigation measures. And thus it is acceptable and is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Now, we don't have any speakers in objection, but we do have Matthew Shepherd, the agent here, if members want to ask any specific. So before I ask him to come up, does anyone have any specific questions to the agent? Oh, we do. Would you mind coming up then, please, if he's here? No, because that's what it says on the script.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
so
Apparently, it's a misstep on my script.
yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry,
Yeah, you
no
can't do
apologies.
You can't do that.
So-
You can only do that, Chair, if you're going against the officer
Yeah, that's
recommendation.
why I thought it was a bit weird having it there, but I followed the script. Sorry, apologies about that. Anyway, questions to the officers then. That's why I shouldn't follow my script so slavishly and should double check. Councillor Anson and Councillor Stables.
3 questions. One is amenity space. Where are people going to relax? It doesn't appear on the, not everybody who, if you went on the site visit this morning, you may not have seen it, but we were given a plan and there was no greenery on the plan. That's not to say that there isn't, okay? Except it was just, where would people relax if weather was to allow them to go out? So that's number 1. Number 2, in terms of the height, have there been any discussions to try and maybe just get one of the floors taken away to try and reduce the bulking and the views from a distance? And then the final thing from a highways perspective, are we sure that we're maximising the amount of money that's going to be needed in order to put in measures to meet the needs of local residents and local ward members in terms of parking, and also including where the operators of the coffee shop may be parking their vehicles, and also where people will be going if they're bringing materials to be used in the coffee shop, because bear in mind its location right on the corner, how are we dealing with that? So just whatever you pick from that, what you can.
Yeah, no problem, Councillor Anderson. I'll just scroll back to the site plan just to show you the overview of the area. So it is acknowledged there is limited amenity space on site. However, given the mitigation which is going to be secured through the section 106 towards green space enhancements within the ward and the sustainable location of the development, there is an area to the side of to the rear, sorry, as you can see on that slide above you, which provides a garden space and patio area for residents to actually use. That will be landscaped and is subject to conditions for landscaping as well. So there is an area on site as well as the obviously off-site green space contribution. Secondly, your point regarding the height and the reduced height and discussions with design colleagues, we have had quite detailed design discussions on this with design officers, obviously, who were consulted, and hence it was revised down from 36 apartments to the 19 before you. There has been as well significant change in the height, scale and the actual width of the building, which has been made narrower. On one of the slides, just to flag for members, so that denotes the dotted line where we have reduced the height and scale, and that was on the basis of mostly the 4-storey section which is adjacent to the residential properties. So on the bottom of that slide there you will see that the height, size and scale of the section closest to the dwellings is reflected in terms of obviously roughly what the height and size of the dwellings will be. And we thought that had gone far enough when we were balancing up the exercise in terms of obviously then asking for further possible reductions in height. Again, would that be defensible if we were to sort of look at reasons for refusal on a design basis? So that was the logic behind the current form of the development, which we feel is on balance acceptable. And on the highways point, I'll let John jump in on that. Thank you.
Right. In answer to your question about the monies, the Section 106 monies for mitigating parking, etc., we have consulted our traffic colleagues who've looked at what measures could be implemented around in the streets around the site, and they've looked at things like pinch points and build-outs and implementing TROs, and they've given us a figure that, based on their experience for implementing those, of £30,000, and that's what we've put in the Section 106.
About the no entry into the private road to try, because that's going to be part of the problem, is that if residents feel that they can park in the private road, some might choose to do so. But if there was a no entry, that would at least provide some form of impediment. We can't do anything because it's a non-adopted road, so we cannot touch that, and the applicants cannot be asked to give anything to do with that part. But as far as the highway is concerned, is there anything more we can do? And have there been any asks from the local ward members for additional works that you've turned down? So you can say to us, right, we've discussed this, they've asked for X, but your colleagues in highways, because to be honest, what the bottom line from me is, I'm concerned that once this development's put in place, your colleagues in highways, the highways engineer is then going to be asked by the ward members to try and sort out a problem that's existing, because there is no doubt that some of the problems are due to existing issues, not all due to the development. So I'm willing to concede that, but is there anything more we can do to help this development to mitigate against any exacerbation of those highways issues?
Yeah, just in answer to that, I know we had a quick chat this morning on site about that issue, and I did have a brief discussion in the office in the short amount of time I was back there with some colleagues, and one of the reasons for not closing that, although it's not something that's been discussed widely, but one of the reasons given for potentially not closing that gap is the commercial premises down that lane, which then, if you closed it, then all that commercial traffic would then be pushed onto the residential streets. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I missed one off, Councillor. You did mention as well the delivery provision for the coffee shop itself. Within the conditions, we haven't specifically attached a delivery hours condition to that, but we can do. So, I mean, to address that, I'm sure the applicants would be fine in terms of, obviously, if officers were to recommend a condition limiting the delivery hours to the coffee shop itself. So that... Exactly, yeah. So we can condition that in line with their requirements and obviously what we feel is acceptable as well, yeah.
Any follow-up, Councillor? No, Councillor Stables?
A couple of questions. The first one is just in terms of for now, but also future, in terms of how we decide, is there any criteria that is set in terms of how we decide what's acceptable in terms of the height of buildings? Because it just would be quite useful for a plans panel in terms of deciding whether something's acceptable, if there is some kind of objective criteria that is put before it that says in this particular type of area, then, you know, 6 stories is acceptable. So that's, I know you've got the answer now, that's just something to kind of think about maybe. And the other question was about, you've mentioned that there's low carbon technologies included. Could you talk a little bit about those and what is included, please?
Yeah, in terms of the low carbon elements, they have submitted an initial energy assessment for the building. What we've done, however, is that is conditioned. So basically, with compliance with EM1 and EM2, which are our sustainability policies, prior to occupation of the dwelling, they are duty bound to submit details to us in terms of the sustainability measures which will be built into the building to achieve those the relevant criteria. So we don't have the specific details yet. The initial energy statement outlines that it'll be like a fabric first approach in terms of insulation measures and energy efficient measures through potential maybe air source heat pumps and those types of elements, but the formal detail will come through the condition discharge, which is prior to occupation, is what we've advised on this one.
Okay, so I understand that you haven't got the detail, but what is you mentioned it'll be in the conditions, so what would we be asking for? Can you give a bit more detail in terms of what we'd actually be asking for them to deliver on?
Yeah, so in general, as I said, it's like sustainability measures. So they're bound by both our EM1 and EM2 policies and separate building control regulations as well, which they'll have to apply for separately. But what they will have to do is they'll have to submit a energy assessment, of a want of a better word, to us, which is then passed to our consultees in terms of energy assessment and how the building performs, and then that is in conjunction with over and above building regulations. So as I said, what they're bound by is they will have to submit water restriction measures, things such as those which are within our policies EM1 and EM2, and they've got to demonstrate compliance with those in order for us to discharge the condition prior to the building being occupied.
So, would there be a requirement, for example, for them to be putting solar panels in, battery storage, that kind of thing? Is that included?
Yeah, at this stage, because the details haven't been drawn up, as long as they demonstrate compliance with those policies, they can do a variety of measures. So as you say, they could potentially put solar panels on, they could utilise air source heat pumps. It's up to them to design a strategy and then submit that for us to then discharge in terms of the conditions. So obviously if they weren't to do that, the condition couldn't be discharged, and thus then there would be an issue. So what we do is we make an assessment at that stage in terms of EM1 and EM2.
Sorry, just to assist Mike a tiny bit, in the page 55, climate change mitigation, paragraph 75 and 76, I think it gives the answers that Councillor Stable's looking for in terms of what we'd expect them to deliver under EN1 and EN2.
Any follow-up, Councillor Stables? Completely forgot your name. I'm having one of those days. Jones.
Oh, sorry.
Trying. The coffee shop. Is it a coffee shop, or will it be turned into a bacon butty and the rest of it? Because there isn't that much facility around there, I'm aware of that. And to be honest, the other piece is, what assessment have you made into what increase in traffic that may produce?
Yeah, I'll answer the bit on the coffee. The applicant's indicating that it's an independent sort of company, who I think it's Java Joe, who are the ones who have been identified as part of it, which are basically a bona fide independent coffee shop. And then in terms of the traffic generation by that, the logic behind obviously not having internal seating and that type of thing is it's purely a takeaway element. So it's designed to capture footfall rather than people going there sitting in. There's obviously no physical space internally to sit in. It's a small kiosk area where it'll just be offering takeaway provision. Hence the assessment's been made on that basis in terms of traffic generation, why highways officers are happy with it.
So, how can I put this? I'll be honest, what lies next to it is a McDonald's that lies within the Asda. Now, most people who like coffee, not that I'm supposed to drink it, but I do, would prefer a proper coffee rather than the stuff that McDonald's might serve. So I would expect, as it goes on, that people will be aware of that, and that will certainly increase the traffic. I'm quite clear that people, because it's only 100 yards further up the road. So
please turn this into a question, Councillor.
The question is, do you not feel as though we'll... Thank you. Do you not feel that over a period of time will lead to an increase in traffic?
I'll let John obviously comment as well, but from our point of view, again, I think it just boils back down to the internal size of the actual kiosk area. There's, as you can see from the slide there, there's literally a small kiosk which will be serving takeaway elements. So, I mean, I suppose the answer is it's a judgment for members to make as well, really. We're not permitting a sort of eating provision or that type of thing, so it's a very small element, and we wouldn't basically feel that generates a huge amount of traffic volume or generation. Yeah.
Any follow-up, Councillor Jones? Councillor Rowntree?
Thank you, Chair. Amenities, services, we've got a bit of a garden area, coffee shop, a gym. I'm thinking back to discussions we had last year over admittedly larger developments. Just what is there any expectation that families will live in this development? And I'd like to have been able to put this to the applicant actually, but I guess that won't be possible now. But just whether there's been any thought given to playground provision, whether that would be appropriate, and is that any kind of conversation that officers have had, please?
I suppose firstly on like the point about family housing, that would relate to the mix which we outlined within the report and the presentation. I think that officers feel it's compliant in terms of the mix. There's obviously a mix between 1, 2 and 3 bedroom units. There's 2 3-bedroom units which I would say are obviously more likely to be the family units in terms of just their overall internal area and the size, but the development's predominantly 1 and 2, so you would presume that it would be less large families just given the internal space itself. And in terms of play provision, we haven't specifically asked that of the applicant. We've obviously just explored the design and the landscaping measures based on the site itself, which is quite constrained. So hence why the view of officers was there is an element of external amenity space which can be used informally, but there's no formal play provision. It's more in terms of play provision could be delivered off-site within green space through the Section 106 agreement funds.
Any follow-up?
Okay, thanks. No, I don't think so. I think we just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Anderson?
The biodiversity gain that we would expect, is that coming through the trees effectively?
Yes, in essence, the site is obviously a vacant standing area, so there's quite a significant biodiversity gain figure, which I think is detailed within the report. I can find it for you, but yeah, that's correct, Councillor Anderson.
With respect to the point that Councillor Jones made, on one of your pictures, I thought I saw chairs outside of it. Were the chairs actually the flat next that may be on the ground next door? It was one of your coloured ones.
Yeah, there is an area. I think it's possibly just one of the CGIs, but there is an area of defensible space at the front which is required for in terms of design and privacy. I think you'll be referring to that one. Yeah, there's an area which is, I suppose you are correct, there's a cutout underneath in terms of the building itself, which, yeah, there are tables and chairs there. Yeah.
Answer it wasn't, but by looking at the pictures would suggest that it is possible. And I also mentioned the same thing on the site visit this morning, that if you are producing a good quality coffee, that will attract people to come just purely for the coffee for no other reason other than it serves something that I want. I personally don't, but I've got no problem with other people doing it.
Yeah, again, I do take your point there, Councillor Anderson, and obviously it is shown there on the CGI. I mean, if members are minded, and potentially it would be a call for the applicants, we could limit potential for outdoor seating via waiver condition if members were minded to do that. But I think, again, on balance for officers, given the size of that coffee shop, it's very limited, yeah.
Sorry, Chair, we sort of had touched on this on the site visit, didn't we, in a way. It's not really big enough to become a destination. You know, it's not the kind of coffee shop that you're necessarily going to travel to. the intention is for passing trade. And even if you look on that pictures, and if Mike went back to the area that shows the layout of the terrace, for want of a better description, it is very small. So I don't think it's going to be an issue quite to the extent that Councillor Anderson does, but it's an interesting discussion, because normally we're trying to introduce these kind of amenities for residents in an area, whereas here we're suggesting they ought to be taken away. Just
Moving on from coffee, Councillor Manaka.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I think this would be a question for roads and traffic. You know, when we came through the ring road, the big roundabout, and then onto the, is it the All Courts Lane, is it? I think because we will be having this development there, it's just coming off there, I think, I'm not, this is a question, will we need a traffic calming measures like bumps because it's coming, or will that be addressed with the section 106? Because I was thinking, at the moment it's okay because obviously there's no houses there, but would there be a need for a calming measure, as in like, I don't know, bumps or something that kind of like makes them to slow down? As I'm looking at this, possibly the development being closer to the corner. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's no specific requirement for traffic calming on Alcott's Lane there, and probably given its proximity to the ring road, it wouldn't be a good idea, quite honestly, because if you suddenly slow traffic down, turning left there, it could lead to complications on the ring road. Notwithstanding that, I mean, the Section 106 monies on this are likely to be aimed at the residential streets just to the north of the site and controlling any issues that might occur in there. But in terms of traffic, this is quite a low traffic generator. It's only got 10 parking spaces. Yeah.
Any other questions from members? Moving on to comments then. Any comments from members? Councillor Anderson?
I'm supportive of the principle of the development. However, I have concerns about how it will look visually in terms of its height and massing. You showed us the one from outside the police station end, as I'll call it, which looked okay. But when you look at it from other angles, I do think it's a bit high. And I've also got concerns about the highways, that I think there will be a need to do a lot of work once the development is in place, in terms of issues with people parking there, with conflicts that will occur, with the need to get, you know, where would you go to the nearest supermarket to get your food, for example? You've got to come in and out, so you will need a vehicle of some description, and people may need to, so the low number of cars you're anticipating may not actually be there, because you're probably anticipating that some of the occupiers won't have a car at all, because of its close proximity to the trade station, so there wouldn't necessarily be the need. But I personally think there will be in that particular location, and I've also got concerns about road safety in terms of people moving around. And as was said, when you're coming off the ring road, coming down to the station, obviously that's going to be very, very busy at times, and people coming from the side roads as to what's going to happen. And so I have general concerns, so I won't be able to support it purely for those two reasons. But I want to make it clear I'm supportive of the principle of what's there, and if it could have been modified, but it's not our job to modify it today, we've got to accept what's here, but it's for those reasons that I won't be able to support it.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Councillor Stables? Yeah, you seem like you're eagerly going towards it. If you don't want to, it's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure I can make some comments.
All right, here we go.
I am supportive of it, although I do have some concerns. I'm supportive of it because we were talking about this on the site. I think it's chicken and egg in many ways, because we want to encourage people not to have a car. We want to encourage people to live sustainably. And therefore, this location being right next to a station is a very sustainable location. It would allow people to live, get the bus. There's buses there as well. Get the bus or train into Leeds City Centre, and therefore to work. The flip side of that is there may be more than 10 cars for this development, and therefore it may generate additional, I'm sure there will be some additional parking issues in the area. So I understand that may happen. On the other hand, as a council, we need to be encouraging sustainable living, and therefore I feel that this kind of development does do that. It's in the right location. It would hopefully attract people who don't have a car to come and live here, who want that kind of location where they can get a train and be connected to other places very easily. So for that reason, I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Anderson has absolutely highlighted my concerns, therefore I won't be supporting it. I think that what I would also add to the word using of sustainability is also the sustainability of this property, this building, and the residents being able to have and use that property to the wills in which they're purchasing or renting it, and therefore as a result being able to live there and not have those complications, regardless of whether it means that we're then pushing them to do other things in terms of green sustainability. So I will not be supporting this application on the basis that Councillor Anderson has said as well.
Any other comments from colleagues? Okay, can I have a proposer for the recommendation to support? Councillor Stables, can I have the seconder, please? So,
Which one, sorry?
Councillor Rontry, I think, got there first. So we'll call to the vote on the officer recommendation. All those for?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
For completeness, all those against?
2.
And any abstentions? Steve, to sum up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the application has been recommended for approval, subject to conditions specified in the report, but also with the additional condition re-delivery times for the coffee shop to be added. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And because everyone's talked about coffee, I'm going to give everyone 60 seconds to get a very quick coffee. So you 5 minutes, people, and then we'll get cracking. Thank you for your patience while everyone's having a quick comfort break. Item number 9, application for the erection of a wedding venue, 33 holiday lodges and a cafe community hub building at Fleet Lane, Alton, Leeds, LS26. Can I ask the officer to present the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. This item is brought on the application to change the use of a former oil storage depot to create a 120 capacity wedding venue, 33 holiday lodges and a cafe/community hub. The proposal is also a departure from the development plan, as the site is allocated as a protected wharf and located within the Greenbelt. The item was brought to members in September 2023 as a position statement, and at this panel, members were broadly supportive of the application, but wanted their concerns surrounding the openness of the Greenbelt, the remaining highways matters, and the Environment Agency's objection regarding flood risk addressed. The applicant has attempted to address their concerns, and they consider their case to be adequate, which I've set out within the officer report. But ultimately, officers don't consider this to be the case, as there remains to be fundamental issues with the principle of the scheme, and this has resulted in 4 reasons for refusal. The reasons recommending the application for refusal are the loss of the protected wharf, the unemployment site, the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, the impact of flood risk, and the failure to pass the flood risk sequential test. Here is the site from an aerial view with the location plan. On the east of the site is the River Aire, and the west is the canal and wharf. To the south of the site are the oil storage containers, and to the north and west of the site are a number of buildings relating to the oil storage depot use. Fleet Lane's main access into the site runs around the perimeter from the south to the east to the north, where an existing car park is situated. The applicant has resolved the initial highways concerns through the agreement of a contribution of £20,250 to improve the access for cyclists and pedestrians. This was one of the initial concerns that members raised at the last panel meeting. At present, the site floor levels are slightly lower than its surrounding, and the volume of the development is concentrated in smaller areas of the site. It's important to highlight here that the site is a protected wharf, which is allocated within the development plan, of which there are only 3 in Leeds. The applicant has been unable to provide sufficient evidence to pass the requirements of Minerals Policy 14, which the wharf is protected under. Here you can see the site from above, which highlights the large volume of height of the existing oil storage containers, which are the cylinders on this side. Here. You can also see how the development is currently concentrated in certain areas of the site, with large areas of the site undeveloped. This is the layout of the proposed development, with the existing car park to the east and an existing car park to the north, which will be extended into the Greenbelt. The wedding venue sits towards the centre of the site, with views over the canal and wharf, and the lodges are sited around the site with a network of roads and pathways, which will serve each lodge. The lodges would have parking directly outside each of them within the site. And to the north of the wedding venue is the community hub and cafe, and this would be accessed by anyone visiting the area, but the rest of the site would be enclosed to customers only. There would be increased planting and biodiversity on the site, and including 2 water feature ponds. Here you can see a CGI interpretation of the proposed development and the sites within the local setting and the general spread of the development across the site. This also shows the planting at year 1 post-completion, and this slide shows the landscaping at year 10 post-completion. There'll be a total of 233 trees spread across the site. That's an increase from 189, which was previously proposed. The applicant has proposed to increase the tree planting to help screen the development and mitigate its impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. This shows the elevations and plans of the wedding venue. This mixes rural materials such as stone with contemporary angled design and also large glazed features, as well as large expanses of glazing which reflects the waterways adjacent. The roof pitches have been reduced from 45 to 40 degrees, and this reduces the height by 890 millimetres. This is an attempt to lessen the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. The internal floor plans of the wedding venue show a ceremony room, a dining room, and other associated space for the venue, as well as toilets and an accessible toilet, with a terrace bar in the roof of the building with lift access. And solar panels can also be seen on the roof. This shows a CGI interpretation of the building, and you can see here it's set up on an embankment with raised levels. This slide shows the community hub and cafe, which for anyone using the area they'd be able to visit, and it benefits from a green roof and solar panels to meet energy policies. The neighbourhood forum have stated in their support letter for the application that they would enter into an agreement with the applicant should the application be approved to run the building as a community hub for the local area. And this shows a CGI interpretation of the building. You can see here as well, this is set up on a higher level. So the following 3 slides outline the design and layout of each lodge. There are 1 and 2 bedroom lodges that have green roofs with open kitchen plans and shower rooms. They're the 1 bedroom, this is the 2 bedroom. You can also see solar panels here. And most of the lodges on the site will benefit from solar panels. The materials will be mostly stone with cladding to match the appearance of the wedding venue. And here you can see the 4 bedroom lodge and honeymoon suite design. And this is a larger design of the lodges. So here you can see a CGI impression of how they'd be viewed across the water, and this is with the landscaping from year 1. You can also see the community hub there as well on the left. And this is at year 10 with the landscaping. So here we have the volume of development of the existing buildings in comparison to the proposed development. The pink outline shows the existing buildings and storage containers on the site in comparison to the proposed development, which can be seen in grey. The existing development is grouped in certain areas of the site, and the applicant has attempted to reduce the overall volume of the proposed development and increase the amount of green space. However, as you can see from the sections, the development is still spread across a large proportion of the site, and although the total volume of the buildings is less than the proposed volume of the buildings, the impact upon the greenbelt's openness is also determined on how the development is spread across the site. And officers consider that this has not been overcome through the applicant's revised proposal. So these 2 slides show the increase in site levels, and the site needs to be raised due to the location in flood zone 3, which is and the vulnerable end use as well of the proposed development. And the site levels are proposed to be raised in some areas by up to 3.1 metres, and this is a reduction than the previous plans, which showed an increase in land levels by up to 4 metres, but this hasn't overcome officers' concerns with openness to the greenbelt due to the reasons I previously stated. The Environment Agency are also a statutory consultee, and they've maintained their objection, stating that the risk of increased off-site flooding from the raised land levels is a concern. For development proposals in areas known to be at risk from flooding, the MPPF requires the application of a sequential test, and the aim of the test is to steer new development to areas of the lowest risk of flooding, and the applicant has failed to pass this test as the applicant has not considered sites identified in the development plan, and these should have been considered alongside a market search. The last slides here are CGI interpretations, which give an impression of how the proposed development would appear from the canal side. This shows the site with landscaping at 1 year post-permission and at 10 years post-permission. Although the scheme will improve the general appearance of the site through the removal of the industrial buildings and the significant number of tree planting and biodiversity improvements, officers still have fundamental concerns with the proposed development's principle due to the loss of the wharf and employment site, the impact on the openness of the greenbelt, the impact on flood risk, and the failure to pass the sequential test. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. We do have speakers in support of the application because this is recommended for refusal. So could I invite Councillor Galton, Mr Law and Mr Windrush, the agent, to the table, please? I understand that Councillor Galton and Mr Law are dividing the 4 minutes between themselves, and Mr Windrush is here to only answer questions. Yeah. Once you're settled, you can start. Thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Martin Law. I'm the chair for Alton and Woodlesford Neighbourhood Forum. I hope you don't mind. I did send you an email last night just to cover the points I'm going to speak about. I'm not used to doing this and might miss some. So over the course of the last 4 years, we've engaged heavily with Ashcore, the applicant, to understand the proposal. We strongly support it, both as a forum and as a community. We've looked at it in a lot of detail, and we don't feel that we need any kind of protection. From a planning point of view, we are very comfortable with what's proposed. Ultimately, the visual impact is going to be massively improved over what's there today, or what might come in the future if it was used for aggregates. So on that grounds, we're really comfortable. But it brings a lot more benefits as well to the community, facilities, cafe, toilets, all sorts of stuff that we've been after for a long time. I would encourage you to ask some questions today of the applicants. There's a lot of detail that's not made it into the officer's report, and they are here and can speak to those points today. I do feel the report, as criticised before, is negatively biased. I'm really surprised when we haven't got more enthusiasm for this, and embracing it and pretty much biting their arms off for what they're bringing. Specifically, all of the previous members' comments and concerns have been met. There are many positive improvements. A few were mentioned just there about the increase in the number of those trees and the lowering of the height, but there are a lot more that are not reflected. The overall rationale for the site isn't really presented, nor is the non-viability to operate it as a wharf. The number of trucks needed just to break even on a daily basis would be 180 to go through the village, which would be devastating. And obviously it would be a much higher number than that.
I'm just conscious, sorry, that you said you're going to share your time and you've gone over your 2 minutes. So do you want to just finish that sentence so Councillor Galton can come in? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to follow on. One of the things we wanted to emphasise was that the community are fully behind these proposals. And actually what is put before you is something which is essentially something which has been co-produced with the community. I don't think there's been virtually any objections that hasn't been overcome from the community itself, and all of the objections that you will see in the application report are from faceless bureaucracy at the end of the day. And even then, they are using less sophisticated evidence than the applicants themselves are to demonstrate that they have taken the issue of flooding seriously. And I really do ask the board to have a questioning about that at some length. In terms of the topographical issue, you will have noted that this did have a very ugly oil terminal within the centre of it. And I will point out that this is a post-industrial landscape where for many generations local people suffered major environmental harm, and so did the landscape, and it's been under recovery for several years since. At this point in time, it's actually a really pleasant environment to be in, and we want to encourage it, and the councillors back that through a levelling up bid called the Active Air, which is to make sure that people are more enabled to use this area effectively, but at the moment they're not. And this kind of private investment is something which I think is really beneficial to make sure that there are amenities there for local people to enjoy this really great local environment. And in terms of the height of this development compared to others, I will remind people that this area had many mines, and the area is marked by several slag heaps, which have been converted into really high quality green space. And this should be something which adds value to all of that collective landscape. Thank you.
And within the 2 minutes. Now, just before we go to question, just in reference to the email you advised, Mr. Law, because that was only sent to members and not to officers, I do have to recommend to members that they disregard the information in that email, because officers have not had a chance to consider it in detail. Questions to the supporters? Any questions, members? No? No. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for coming today. I'd just like to ask a bit about the flooding issue. I know there's a difference in view between the applicant and obviously what the officers have said and other interested parties like the Environment Agency. Why should we prefer your version, is my question.
Sorry, that's to us too. So if you let me, I'll read out something, if that's okay. On the flood risk concerns, over the past 3 years, Wheatwoods has worked diligently with the Environment Agency to address flood risk concerns. However, there have been shifting expectations and extended review periods, and that's meant that meaningful progress has been almost impossible because the goalposts kept being changed. So the Environment Agency's objections initially centred on flood risk to others, but it was based on flawed models that showed flooding on houses and drainage ditches. And the review that was carried out by the applicant revealed that their analysis relied on outdated LiDAR data from before one of the housing developments, which has been there for several years now, actually got built. So they were working on very old data. In response to their compensatory storage concern, they revised the platform area, as was pointed out earlier by Lydia, so it's actually reduced the level of the development overall. They provided a flood conveyance area to allow water to flow through the site. And despite this, the Environment Agency further expanded their objections to include a minor 24mm flood extent increase in the air and colder navigation, which was demonstrated through the study which was paid for by the applicant that actually it posed no additional risk to others along that route. So I'm sure the applicant will actually be able to give you a much better technical response to that, but I think the point is that the Environment Agency is working on outdated systems. The applicant has provided fresh evidence to show how they have responded to those concerns. The Environment Agency hasn't actually bothered to mark that homework, which they've done, and in the absence of that, the planning authority has decided that, therefore, the applicant hasn't demonstrated that they're able to achieve what is being asked of them. But actually, it's the fault of the Environment Agency for not actually giving a judgment on the revised evidence put forward. And I don't think the applicant should be punished for that.
Any follow-up, Councillor Rowntree?
Thanks. You say you've been working on this for 3 years, is that correct?
Yes, just a little bit longer, yeah. We did do a pre-app with the council before then and the public consultation prior to that, yeah.
Any other questions, Councillor Rowntree?
No, thank you. No.
Councillor Johnson, Councillor Bowden.
Right. I've known this site for 30 years, and it's a tip. It's been a tip for 30 years. And I did note this morning that the oil leaks that was constantly across the pavements were there, had disappeared. So I recognise that. I also recognise that the site does need to be improved because it's an absolute eyesore on that part of the canal. I have concerns about the number of vehicles that will come down Fleet Lane. That is one concern that really bothers me. The other thing is I don't really think you've addressed the issue of flooding, to be absolutely honest. And I'm aware, and I have...
Can we frame this into a question,
yeah,
please,
I am
Councillor?
turning into a question. In a minute... yeah, I don't feel you've addressed that issue. I don't think you've addressed the issue of flooding there, and I still think that there's a genuine risk of flooding taking place there. No matter what you do, it's a difficult...
So what's the question, please, Councillor?
So the question is, do you feel as though you've addressed the issue of flooding?
Yes, very much so. Our flood risk consultants have gone through this in great detail. As Councillor Galton's highlighted, we've provided an updated model based on more accurate and focused information. The Environment Agency are actually not applying the tolerances that they've applied on various other sites in various other districts as well. And if they were applying that same tolerance, this would pass their tests. As has been identified, it's only a few small areas where there's a very negligible, in inverted commas, increase in flood risk, and they're at the bottom of a drainage ditch where there's a tree and on the roof of a house, in short, which to our experts does not make sense and isn't sufficient to maintain an objection.
Any follow-up, Councillor? Councillor Bowden. Oh, sorry.
No,
yeah, Councillor Bowden.
Yeah, it's just a question of where the development sits. So in regards to the sort of current residential properties on that side of St Aidan's, is there any sort of mitigations in regards to sort of domesticated animals and their access to St Aidan's? And do we have any on that site? I think the point I'm trying to make is that the impact that I could see that could go on to St Aidan's from one side of it, is that, I guess, if this development was to take place, it'd be far easier for pets, especially cats, to be able to go onto the development, stay around the development, and then be able to go onto St Aidan's. Is there any current mitigations on the residential areas and plans on the site? Because if they were, they'd be able, quite easily be able to get onto St Aidan's from that west side now.
Well, in terms of the development itself, because it's non-residential, you wouldn't expect to have any domestic animals on site, unless somebody wishes to have their local dog as their page at their wedding event. But of course, you would expect those animals to be on a leash rather than being let loose in the local environment. The nearest permanent domestic dwelling have been there for many years, and that is at the Lemon Royd Lock area where the barges are, and there are 2 lockkeepers' cottages. And I don't know of any specific mitigations about their domestic animals and access to St Aidan's, but I would have thought that if there had been an issue, that would have been addressed, because there's a very good close partnership between the Canal and Rivers Trust and the RSPB running the St Aidan's site. And I'm glad you've referenced the St Aidan's site, because I just don't think it points out that in terms of flood abatement in the locality, we were very lucky to get millions of council investment in flood abatement measures in Woodlesford, which ensured that when Kirkstall suffered really significant damage in those Boxing Day floods several years back, actually Woodlesford was unscathed. And of course, with the natural abatement of places like St Aidan's Nature Reserve, the risk of flooding is far less apparent, I would suggest, in this part of the river basin than it is in other areas. And that's why, as a local community who would be on the front line of any flooding instance, we are assured through a good 3 years of working with the developer that actually they have got things taken into consideration. Thank you.
Any follow-up, Councillor? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. As has been mentioned about the environment agencies and your concerns about what their objection has been, could I just ask you to comment then on as a result of the Canal and Rivers Trust, and they've also lodged an objection due to insufficient information in relation to flood risk?
Yeah, sure. We met with the Canal Rivers Trust on a couple of occasions, and they were open to the idea. They initially just had concerns about the loss of the wharf and how that may help their waterway in the future. But we've highlighted in a lot of submissions why that's not viable, partly through costs and the actual running of a business, and the dredging that would be required of the canal to actually operate it in that way. So I think that's where their objection has centred more so on the loss of the wharf rather than actual any flood risk.
On that basis, would you say that the report is wrong?
I think we've touched on in terms of the evidence that's in the report that queries a lack of evidence provided by the applicant, and that's been significant that we don't think has been reported fully at all. So yes, I agree.
I'd like to come back and comments to ask what officers would like to comment, given the fact that this is being contested.
And we'll do that when we get to questions to the officers. Any other questions to the... No? Thank you very much. And we will now move to questions to the officers, so thank you. Questions to the officers. Councillor Firth. You can sit back down now, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask for some clarity in relation to the statutory consultee responses and objections and the points raised by the applicant and their supporters?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get the Canal and River Trust response up here. So it says, notwithstanding the above, the Trust is concerned that insufficient information has been provided to detail how the increase in flood levels resulting from the proposed works would impact the navigation.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
Thank you. And can I ask in relation to the contestant of the Environment Agency's comments as well?
So the Environment Agency have actually stated that the model tolerance is not considered to be an appropriate justification to demonstrate that the proposed development does not increase flood risk to others.
Any follow-up, Councillor? Any other questions to the officers? No? Moving to... Oh, go on, Councillor Firth.
Could I just ask officers to clarify a little bit more? The larger basis for this rejection of this application is also based on the green belt. Can I just ask in terms of qualification around that, in particular with this land and obviously its previous use, and just a bit more meat on the bone in terms of the detail there? Thank you.
So regarding the openness to the green belt, it is previously developed land, which means that it can be developed in relation to the exceptions test in the NPPF, but it's how that development relates to the existing development. At present, the development is kind of contained to certain areas of the site, and what's proposed spreads the development across the entirety of the site. So although the volume of all the buildings will actually be less than the existing, the proposed spread of the development across the entirety of the site is what will impact the openness of the green belt, as well as the increased levels in land being raised across not the entirety of the site, across sections of the site. So that also adds to the impact on openness.
Councillor Stables.
One of the points that was brought up about the submission from the consultee, the Environment Agency, was that the data was out of date that was used. Can you comment on that in any way?
I don't know if Helen, you want to comment on that. We've got our flood risk policy team here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Helen Miller. I work in the policy and plans section of planning. So I work quite closely with the Environment Agency, and we don't attempt to replicate what they do. So we rely very much on them advising us about levels of flood risk. And where an applicant does their own modelling, we're not in a position to verify whether or not that's accurate. If the Environment Agency confirm it, then we will accept what the Environment Agency tell us. And there is a process for challenging Environment Agency, and you know, it does take time, but on occasions the Environment Agency will accept the modelling that's been provided by an applicant. But on this occasion, the Environment Agency have maintained their objection, and I did speak to Aaron a couple of weeks ago, and he said they weren't satisfied with it, and you know, unfortunately the objection has been sustained.
Any follow-up? Okay. No, you happy now? Any other questions to the officers from members? Moving into comments then. Any comments, please? Any comments? Yeah, Councillor Stables.
So, whilst I think looks fantastic, it looks like a brilliant design, and I can see why it would be very appealing for local people to have this on their doorstep. And I understand all the positives that this would bring in terms of to the local community, in terms of amenity, in terms of the look and appearance of the area, in terms of employment. I can see all those benefits. But there's a big but, and the big but is that we know that with climate change that there are going to be more and more higher frequency of torrential downpours, and we only unfortunately have to look to last week, and we've seen on the news the torrential flooding that's been experienced across many areas of the country, and this lying between the Aire and Calder navigation and the River Aire is you could just, in terms of common sense, you can look and think this is going to flood. And, the Environment Agency, and I hear what's been said, and I understand, that it might not be the most up-to-date data that's being used, but we have to go on the information that we've been given and that's before us. And if the Environment Agency, which is a consultee that we've relied on, is saying that this is a flood risk and it's going to push flooding potentially elsewhere, I can't support it for that simple reason. There are other reasons as well in terms of the impact on the green belt. But this, to me, is the most important matter that for that reason, I can't
Bless me.
agree with it.
Thank you. Any other comments from members? Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. I'm genuinely sorry that I don't feel able to support this. I think when this came to us 12, 14 months ago, I think most of us had a sense at that time that there's a rare opportunity to do something for an area that's pretty much an eyesore as it is at the moment, and it would. We shouldn't knock it on the head, as it were, at that stage. It would be worth, despite a range of objections from different interested parties, officers, and some of the other consultees we've heard from, that it would bear further investigation and exploration to see if the problems can be overcome. And they have in the case of the highways, obviously. But for myself, as I think for Councillor Stables, the flooding issue is decisive because of the global situation. The number and personally, as a councillor for Kirkstall, and have a sort of sense of the impact that the air bursting its banks can have, and I think we have to be super cautious in these circumstances, and unless you take the view that the Environment Agency's been utterly perverse about this. I mean, the data is disputed, but I think safety first is the only possible approach to my mind on this one. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Jones?
It might make sense if the Environment Agency and the applicant actually discuss this in more detail, because that way we can come to a more rounded view. At the moment, there's still quite conflicting points of view. And for that reason, to be absolutely honest, I think we need to delay making a decision on it, to be absolutely fair.
I just want to clarify, because that you say delay. Are you making an alternative proposal to the officer recommendation?
Yes.
Can I?
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. Just before we get slightly off track here, I understand Councillor Jones's comment, but we have had the application for nearly 3 years, so discussions with the Environment Agency, I think, have possibly been done to the death, and you heard Helen Miller's explanation of how the council treats it. But we also, even if we were to go down that particular route, we also need to remember that you have 4 reasons for refusal here. So the other ones are still relevant, and from our perspective at the moment, you know, the issues related to the Greenbelt are still there, so it wouldn't actually solve everything, because we'd probably still be coming back with a recommendation for refusal based upon that. So I just thought I'd make that clear.
Are you wishing to withdraw that then, Councillor Jones?
Sorry, there's a protected wharf issue too as well, which is relevant. We only have 3 in Leeds. There's one operational further up towards the city centre, I understand, but this would be potentially the loss of one of them.
Yes, I wish to withdraw that.
Any other comments before we proceed to a vote? Yeah, Councillor Bowden?
Yeah, seeing the development today, it almost seems all sort of counterproductive, because I think the development has its real merits, but I think that there are just too many buts and too many concerns with it. But I do think I can understand why local residents would obviously prefer what we can see on our screens right now, because it does look absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I think there's just too many concerns there. Thank you.
Final call for comments. Can I have a proposer for the officer recommendation, please? Who wishes to propose? Councillor Stables. Who wishes to second? Councillor Manaka. So we will proceed to the vote. All those for the officer recommendation?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, unanimous.
And for completeness, all those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Do you want to quickly sum that up, Stephen? Steve?
Very briefly, the application has been refused permission on the basis of the 4 reasons for refusal contained in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Item number 10, date and time of the next meeting is proposed as Thursday, the 9th of January 2025 at 1:30. That concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you for your attendance and contributions. I now declare the meeting closed, and could I request members of the public to make their way out of the building. Thank you, and have a good New Year and Merry Christmas. We got that in the wrong order, but we still said them both.